for joining us here today. And firstly, just again, thank you to the Supplier Development Programme for their support over these past couple of sessions. It's been absolutely excellent. So we're working today to roughly a 30-minute presentation, and then the rest of the time is, as Fran said, to questions. So right, there we go. And I just want to say that the questions and answer section of this session will be captured and shared afterwards for you as well. So for context, for those who are unfamiliar with the participation framework, in late 2023, the Scottish Government announced its intention to develop a framework agreement to support our commitment to establishing a person-centred approach across government and to increasing the use of participatory processes. And so we're here today to share more information around the development of the framework, which has seen some changes following internal and external feedback, to gain your views on the development of the framework as well, and to answer any questions that you may have for us as well, importantly. And this afternoon, we are particularly keen to seek your feedback and any questions, again, you may have in relation to the development of a specific lot as part of this framework for organisations that work with individuals with a disability or impairment. As part of this presentation, we'll cover some key information to help inform understanding of the framework, alongside, importantly, our intention to explore the possibility to have this lot reserved for disabled people's organisations and what this would mean or look like in practice. And we're looking at reserving this lot to better support organisations in the sector to bid for participatory work through the framework. So before I move into our agenda for today, for further context, the external feedback I mentioned earlier that we've been working with up until now was through a request for information survey that was shared earlier this year through Public Contract Scotland. And this was with suppliers who were registered to this framework opportunity, and this helped us kind of gain further understanding of the market and the sector, and help to form these external engagement sessions. So our agenda for today is we'll look at some background to why we're introducing this framework agreement, and then we'll move into building understanding of the framework agreement, looking at some procurement-related kind of information and terminology, before moving into questions and answers, and then finally we'll cover some next steps. So, background. So as a government, we are increasingly adopting participatory approaches to involve members of the public in the definition, design and delivery stages of a government decision. And on the left-hand side here, you'll see some newspaper clippings, some images that exemplify this. So, for example, Scottish Government has undertaken some more high-profile, larger-scale engagements, such as our Climate Assembly and Citizens Assembly for Scotland. But more so, we're seeing smaller-scale engagements, such as citizens' duties, citizens' panels, alongside more embedded forms of participation, so participatory budgeting, and also the co-design of the National Care Service, which is a more ongoing process that we're undertaking at the moment. And at Scottish Government, we're describing participation as how people get involved in decisions which affect them or are important to them. So our vision for public participation is that people can be involved in decisions that affect them, making Scotland a more inclusive, sustainable and successful place. And here you'll see a bit of a potted timeline of how we've kind of reached this point for the development of the participation framework. So there are many strategies, policies, reports, etc. that outline or recommend participation. But these milestones here have been chosen as they've had a cross-government impact that put into focus the need for more public participation in the work of government. So, for example, the Christie Commission in 2011, some of you might be familiar with that, it stipulated that services must be designed and built through collaboration. We also have our In the Service of Scotland mission, principles and values, and this is what we work towards as a civil service, and that is what we put people we serve at the heart of everything we do. Most pertinent to this framework agreement would be the Children and Young People Framework Agreement. So this was established to help officials meet and respond to Article 12 of the UNCRC, and that is the right to for young people to have their views heard on matters that affect them, and for those views to be taken seriously. So this is This framework is up and running, it's operational, and suppliers have been awarded to this framework. So now we're looking at a framework agreement for adults and for so separately from children. But taken together, all of these kind of points on this timeline basically highlight Scottish Government's commitment to designing person-centred services, and this is a key driver to involve people in the work of government more frequently and also in innovative ways. So the benefits of taking a participatory approach are recognised across government. We recognise people are experts of their own lives, and solutions need to be embedded in this knowledge. Increasing diversity in the room is important for enhancing problem-solving capacity, collective creativity and innovation. It can also help reduce risk and protects against poor outcomes, ineffective policy, controversy, and can integrate service provision better. It can support and legitimacy for policy decisions. It allows the public to follow, influence and understand the processes leading to decision, which is important as oftentimes it can seem quite opaque. And also it can enhance public trust in government and democratic institutions by giving people a role in public decision making. However, taking these together, we are now at a stage where a more coordinated approach to commissioning participatory work is required for us to better utilise and also realise these benefits and outcomes. So this is where the participation framework comes in. So the framework agreement will aim to create a coordinated approach to commissioning participatory work with adults at the Scottish Government. And it will look to appoint suppliers who have the skills and expertise to design and deliver high quality and inclusive engagement with a wide range of people, particularly those identified as being seldom heard and furthest from decision making. And I'll come back to those two key terms later on in the session. It's anticipated that the appointed suppliers will be both organisations operating at a national level and also those working within specific communities. And these organisations would use both digital and in-person participatory approaches. So moving on to some terminology, some procurement terminology. So to help with providing some understanding of the framework, how the framework will operate, these next few slides will cover some procurement related information and terminology. So I'll run through these as they come up throughout the presentation and we'll provide some context, and they're also helpful for reviewing the slides afterwards as well. So a framework agreement is a pre-agreed list of suppliers who have been assessed and evaluated on their ability to meet the requirements of a framework agreement. And the framework agreement defines terms and conditions and also a pricing structure. Associated with the framework is kind of the term call-off, so call-off contracts, call-off requirements, etc. So a call-off is the individual piece of work commissioned which would specify what is required and when. And this is created when this has been agreed with the supplier using the terms and conditions of the framework. The framework service provider, so these are organisations appointed to the framework. You may be more familiar with the term service provider, contractors, suppliers and tenderers, but these all terms mean the same thing. The framework manager, so this would be the Open Government team at Scottish Government, that's my team. So we will oversee the management of the framework and will be the main contact for monitoring, reporting and evaluation. What is a lot? So this is a approach we're taking with this framework agreement. So a lot is one of several categories that goods or services can be divided into. And the use of lots, importantly here, allows for multiple providers to be appointed following one procurement process. And in this case, each lot would be made up of organisations with something in common. And using a lotting approach allows policy areas at Scottish Government to invite organisations from one or multiple lots to apply for a contract. And finally, a mini competition. So this again is another approach we're looking to apply to the framework. So you may be more familiar with the term a quick quote. So a mini competition can be referred to this also. This is where multiple suppliers are invited to submit a tender or bid to deliver a piece of work, and all suppliers on this lot would be invited to bid, and the winner would be based on who offers the best quality and price. So as part of this presentation, we also wanted to touch on intersectionality, as this was an area that was raised in the external engagement survey results and internally as well at Scottish Government. So for the purposes of this framework, we do have different lot categories at the moment, separating out different groups and communities. And Although this is the case, we do not intend for this to preclude an intersectional approach being applied. As part of the framework, we are encouraging subcontracting, and this can support an intersectional approach. And as part of the framework agreement being established, we will also develop a buyer's guide for Scottish Government staff, and this will include information on intersectionality and will outline the staff should actively consider this when developing tender specifications. It's something we're aware is inherent in a lot of systems and processes, but very much so in participation as well. And just for clarity, we just wanted to put here Scottish Government's definition of intersectionality. And this is that a recognition that people are shaped by their simultaneous membership in multiple interconnected social categories. The interaction between multiple social categories occurs within a context of connected systems and structures of power, for example, laws or governments. And a recognition of inequality of power is key to intersectionality. And finally, structural inequalities reflected as relative disadvantage and privilege are the outcomes of the interaction between social categories, power relations and contexts. And as a result, an individual's experience of inequality can be chronic or transitionary, creating unique lived experiences. So alongside the development of the buyer's guide, I also want to mention that the framework manager will also act to reinforce this message and will be a point of contact throughout the drafting of the specification by any policy team or business area that goes through the framework as well. So I mentioned earlier terms furthest from decision making and seldom heard. So the framework will aim to engage a wide variety of people, and the lotting structure will show this in more detail in the next slide. However, we recognise that public participation can often seek to take place with vulnerable and or marginalised groups, and adequate skills and expertise are required to do this well. So for this reason, we have currently chosen for the framework to specifically have this focus instead of a more generalised approach to participation. And as part of this framework, we want to prioritise those furthest from decision making and those who are considered seldom heard. So furthest from decision making, this is individuals with certain protected characteristics, identities and or experiences that impact their access to decision making power. This impacts a broad range of individuals, including those who are disabled, from minority ethnic backgrounds, from areas of high multiple deprivation, those part of the LGBTQI+ community, girls and young women. And seldom heard refers to underrepresented individuals who are less likely to be heard by professionals and decision makers. And these groups or individuals may need to be treated with particular sensitivity and may be marginalised or dispersed. And seldom heard groups can include mobile populations, vulnerable groups, end of life and carers and care experience. However, in the specification, we want to mention that we use the terms furthest from decision making and seldom heard to describe comparable forms of exclusion. So moving into our proposed lot categories. So I'll put these up on the screen now. So as you can see, lot 1 recognises the role of organisations with multiple specialisms, so those that engage with a wide variety of people, and we'll focus on representative sampling and larger scale methods to carry out inclusive engagement at a general population level. And then lots 2 to 7 provide more bespoke services to identify groups. And as you can see, lot 3 is on their organisations with individuals with a disability impairment over 18 years of age. And again, just a caveat, all of these are over 18 years of age because there is a Children and Young Persons Framework Agreement already established. And these lot categories have been revised following external and internal feedback, and we continue to revise these. These are not set in stone at the moment. And we're open to discussing these and changing where required the lotting structure to make sense to the sector and how organisations operate. But we'll come back to this at the end of the session in the Q&A. But these are currently the lots that we're proposing to have as part of the framework. So actually, sorry, I'll go back there because I've mentioned there we've got, as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, we're looking at reserving lot 3. And I just want to say that Freya will come back to that in this presentation and what that means in practice for organisations. But we'll quickly cover the intended outcomes to give a bit of a broader picture of what we're aiming to do as part of this framework agreement. So we will appoint organisations that have demonstrated understanding, expertise and evidence of quality, because this is extremely important to high quality participation. we are looking to have a mini competition approach, as this can be seen to encourage innovation and creativity by inviting multiple bids from multiple suppliers in a lot. Establishing the framework in the way that we're looking to do will enable tailored approaches to be based on target group needs and preferences. So suppliers will have established relationships, and they'll be able to create environments conducive to inclusive participation that, importantly, ensures the safety and well-being of participants. We're hoping the framework will support officials to move towards more impactful styles of participation. Government often consults and has a very established consultation process, but we are looking to for this framework to move past that kind of stage of engaging with the public and moving to more, as I said, involving and collaborating. And on the right hand side, sorry, is our spectrum of participation. So this is in our participation handbook, our Scottish Government's guidance for good participation. And as you can see, this is, it's not a ladder, it's a spectrum. It's just outlined a bit more in a ladder format. But yes, we want to move engagement more to those perhaps in many cases more meaningful types of participation. We are hoping the framework will remove previous barriers between theory and practice that's seen across government. And we recognise, and we want the framework to recognise supplier buyer expertise and support collaboration to improve the delivery of participatory engagements. So working on specifications and how that is delivered together. And finally, importantly, it will also support the development of an evidence bank for staff. So this will mean that any participatory work carried out through the framework will be stored and captured, and this will seek to reduce duplication of engagement. We're aware that's something that has been raised in the sector that that could be seen by Scottish Government, and we're hoping this will be able to help with that. So I think now I'll pass on to Freya to give you a bit more information around what the procurement process is, what's involved, and also the information around the reserve law. So over to you, Freya.
Thanks, Nisha. In this slide, I'll talk through what happens at the call-off level, and that would be once the framework's up and running. The Scottish Government buyer will contact suppliers by email with a short overview of the project to give them advance notice and gauge capacity. The buyer will finalise their invitation to tender documents and create a quick quote using the quick quote facility on Public Contract Scotland, PCS, and then they would invite all of the suppliers on the lot and give them, I've written around 2 weeks here because technically it could be shorter, but we would recommend 2 weeks or longer to put in to advertise for a bid. The supplier will not need to fill out the single procurement document, and the technical questions will be streamlined. Suppliers will provide their proposals for the piece of work and specific pricing, and then responses get evaluated and suppliers will be debriefed and the outcome recorded and published on PCS. In the next slide, I'll talk you through the key information about the procurement process to bid to be one of the framework suppliers. So the framework will be for a maximum of 4 years, including extension options. We'll use the single stage open procurement procedure, and the contract notice will be advertised on Public Contract Scotland and find a tender service, which links on the back end. All tender documents will be available via PCS Tender, which is a different website to Public Contract Scotland, but there will be a link to PCS Tender within the contract notice. when the procurement goes live, all the correspondence and messaging will be managed through the PCS tender platform, and so any answers to your questions, they'll be published so all suppliers can see through that. SMEs, registered charities, NGOs and supported businesses can bid individually, with subcontractors, or as part of a consortium. And we plan to issue the contract notice this year in the autumn and award in the spring. The evaluation criteria will use the most economically advantageous tender scoring methodology, and it's likely that would be a 70% quality, 30% price. The full details of the evaluation criteria and what all the weightings will be in the invitation to tender documents once they're published. If we can go to the next slide, that will show the key steps of the procurement process. So we're currently in the first stage, which is letting the market know about the procurement and engaging and to help develop our documents. Once we've finalised the documents, the contract notice will be issued via PCS, and then there'll be the tender period, and it's likely the tender period will be longer than the 30 days minimum. It's likely that that would probably be for around 2 months, and then following that we'd evaluate, and that bit probably will take some time because we're not sure how many bids we're going to get, but to give you an idea, we have over 100 organisations that have noted interest, so we could get a few. Suppliers will be notified of the outcome, and then the contract will be awarded, and there'll be a mobilisation period once suppliers have been notified who's been a successful framework supplier, but before buyers can call off using it, just to help get suppliers prepared. And while the framework's live, we'll move into the contract management stage, and there'll be some reporting requirements. Okay, if we could go to the next slide. So yeah, this slide talks about the single procurement document. So that's something like I'd mentioned before. If you've bid for contracts, this might be something you've already filled in. It's a standardized questionnaire, and it allows us to check that suppliers are suitable. So the chunk of it is covering company information, criminal convictions, but then the more optional side of the single procurement document, like procurement can choose to put in, it's likely that we will include minimum insurance requirements, and some economic and financial standing requirements. It's likely we'd use like the current ratio for this, and we may also ask about previous experience. For any subcontractors involved as part of your bid, they would also be required to fill out a form as well. Tenderers must commit to pay the real living wage as part of any work undertaken as a framework supplier. So that would be like for any of the call-off contracts, and they also need to commit to paying subcontractors within 30 days and provide a plan about responding to the climate emergency. Next slide, please. So for this specific lot, as Nisha mentioned, we are exploring making it a reserved lot, and this is part of our procurement policy, where it's a Scottish Government policy to use reserved lots wherever it's appropriate. So wherever we think that suppliers might be able to bid as a supported business. So the procurement legislation defines a reserved lot as needing to meet the following test. The first part is the main aim of the bidding organisation must be to socially and professionally integrate disabled or disadvantaged people. And the second part is that at least 30% of the employees in the bidding organisation must be disabled or disadvantaged persons. And if you meet that, that would be you'd be then referred to as a supported business. There is a little bit of paperwork that would go into this to fill out. I think it's a questionnaire to check if you would be considered. And yeah, this is something that we are like actively exploring. So it could be that in the final version we don't. It isn't a reserved lot, but it's our intention to try to make it work so it is. But we'd really appreciate any feedback about this approach. And if you feel like your organisation wouldn't be able to meet it, but would still have things to offer, or if you think it's positive and your organisation would be looking to bid for this lot as a supported business. It's also, I believe that it only applies to the main contractor being a supported business. So I believe it would still be possible to subcontract elements to a non-supported business. But yeah, as I said, we're still taking feedback on this. So yeah, any would be appreciated. Yeah, and then so this slide outlines what you might expect to see within an invitation to tender or ITT pack. We'd have a instructions to tenderers document, a number of schedules, which would include like the specification, reporting requirements like key performance indicators, details of approved subcontractors, data protection and cybersecurity. You'll also find the evaluation and award criteria. There'll be technical questions specific to each lot, but then there'll be some Scottish Government procurement policy questions, and these would include fair work, climate emergency and community benefits. And it's likely for these types of more generic procurement policy questions that you would just ask that we would just ask you to answer them at the framework stage, and then to avoid repetition for subsequent call-off contracts. We'll also include a pricing schedule. So at the framework level, this is likely to use maximum day rates using different job roles or job families. For example, there might be a job family of around management or director or admin support staff. And these are used to cap what the maximum staff costs would be at that rate. But then when there are individual call-off contracts, there would also be an area for you to put in fixed costs for that individual piece's work as well, for projects which aren't just using staff costs. So for example, if you needed to hire a venue or yeah, have specific costs for that project, like travel. And then there'll also be the Scottish Government terms and conditions for framework agreements that you would need to sign up to as well. Next slide, please. Okay, so on this slide, we've pulled together some questions that suppliers might have. So who can use the participation framework? The framework will just be for Scottish Government use only. It's not a national contract, and it isn't mandatory for Scottish Government staff to use the framework. However, we would strongly encourage it. And are there reporting requirements for the supplier? Yeah, as I've alluded to before, there would be contract management meetings that would be held, and you would submit outcome reports, including key performance indicators, and an annual evaluation to help us record what work's been going through the framework and if there's ways to improve. We appreciate that reporting requirements can be a burden on suppliers, but we try and make it proportionate to the contract and not use too much of your time, while also still collecting some of the information that we need to help make sure it runs smoothly. Can suppliers be added to the framework once the framework's been awarded? And that's no. Once this goes out to market, there'll just be one opportunity at the beginning to become an approved framework supplier, and then they will be fixed for the duration of the contract. Will the framework affect current grants agreements in place which have been awarded by the Scottish Government? So grants won't be affected. It's down to Scottish Government business areas and ministers to determine if work would be covered by a grant or if a procurement's more appropriate. But if you're currently receiving a grant, that wouldn't, this being awarded would not affect that directly. Is there a guide to support people using the framework? Yeah, so there will be a buyer's guide to help our staff who are going to use the framework effectively, and we'll outline things that buyers should know and think about before beginning the procurement process. We'll offer guidance about things like how long to advertise call-offs, also about the Scottish Government would be expected to pay for like accessibility costs to ensure that everyone can participate with the framework participation activities. And what support is there for SMEs? So to support building capacity, the Supplier Development Programme, which you should have all signed up for in order to attend this event. They have a long list of different events and training, and they're particularly useful for SMEs and to help organisations get an idea of what we're expecting and what you need to comply with making a bid for a contract like this. We also have some flexibility to have a longer tender period, and as I mentioned earlier, we would hope that with your initial application at the beginning, we'd avoid you repeating all of the same information again and again. And can I partner with another organisation? Yeah, so there will be a Microsoft Forms linked that I'll issue, and you can register your interest as a potential subcontractor on the framework, or if you're looking to partner with another organisation, or if you're looking for subcontractors too. So there'll be there's a few questions on the Microsoft Forms, but one of them is if you would like to share your name and your email address and your organization's name so that other suppliers can see this. And this is just a way for names and organizations to get shared, and it's trying to replicate the old days where you all might be in a room and you could chat to each other over coffee. So this is completely opt-in and it's not mandatory at all. It's just there as something that might be helpful to help different organisations get in touch with each other. Okay, so I'll hand you over to Nisha to talk about the next steps.
Great, thanks, Freya. That was really helpful. So yes, just quickly touching on next steps. So as Freya mentioned, we're estimating that we'll award the framework in spring 2025. However, there are some factors that will likely impact this. So, for example, the feedback we receive from external engagement sessions that we're currently undertaking, like these, on the number of suppliers who choose to bid to the framework in each lot, and then also the time needed to evaluate these bids as well. Just to reiterate that if you're interested in this opportunity and you want to receive more information and keep updated, then the way to do this is to register to the prior information notice on Public Contract Scotland. This is where all the information will be shared, presentations, information, the request for information, survey questions, all information associated with this framework agreement will be detailed there, and that's where for example, the invitation to tender documents will be published and issued. So as part of that as well, register as a supplier onto PCST as well. And then finally, yes, just mentioning this MS Teams form that we have. So as Freya mentioned, it's where you can detail if you would like to be have your contact details to be a subcontractor. But we also have the Teams form is also further information gathering for us, which is really helpful. So for example, we have some questions around how long your organisation will likely need to bid, offering options such as 30 days or 56 plus days, and that will help inform our approach to the invitation to tender. And it's also where you can detail any questions you may have for us following this session as well. So maybe it's a good time to move into our final slide here. So if you have any questions that you perhaps you might go away and talk to your team or whoever else that you springs to mind afterwards, then this MS Teams form is a way for you to ask us or to note any comments that maybe you didn't get the chance to at this session, for example. So as mentioned, questions and answers will be captured and expanded on in writing. So we'll make sure that everyone receives a copy of this. Again, the framework agreement is still under development. These external sessions are really important for us to make sure that we are developing this in a way that makes sense to people. And we are missing Amy Watson today, our Principal Research Officer. So Freya and I will answer questions as fully as possible. But if we don't have an answer, again, we'll follow up in writing. On the left-hand side here is just the framework ambition for context for framing questions. And yes, we're interested to hear your views around this approach to the lotting structure and our intention to look to reserve a lot as well for lot 3. We're aware the sector are currently overstretched and need adequate time, for example, to prepare in advance for submitting any bids and to plan your time effectively. So we'd like to just enter a discussion or dialogue on how this mechanism could help to better enable this. So I'll stop sharing and pass back to Fran, who's helping us with the questions.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Let me just stop the recording there.